وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا وأوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to another edition of the Sulaimaan Ravat show. I want to start this evening's program by asking you a question. Who do you work for? And I'm going to ask my operators whom you can't see, but I can see, Russell and Yusuf and Will and others. Who do you work for? And perhaps they would say that we work for Farhad Umar or we work for ITV. And wherever you may be watching this program from, you may be taking your boss's name or you may be taking your own name. I don't know. Maybe you work for yourself. Who do you work for? Do you work for your boss? Do you work for your company? And the reason I ask you this question is I want to share with you a story which I read earlier this week. It is mentioned with regards a billionaire. I'm not going to mention his name, and I don't know his name actually. This billionaire, he died. And the day he died, he left behind $1.9 billion. $1.9 billion. This was his fortune. And after he died, not a long while thereafter, he left all the money to his wife, $1.9 billion. And not a long while thereafter, his wife married the chauffeur. And the chauffeur made a statement. He said, "All my life, I thought I was working for my boss, only to realize that my boss was working for me. All my life, I was working for my boss. That's what I thought. I mean, here's this billionaire. I'm driving him around. He's limo. I'm driving him around just so that I get a salary, just so that I get a wage. But in reality, he was breaking his back to make money. He left the money to his wife. His wife married me. The way things turned out, he was working for me. I still had it easy. He had to go to all the high-level meetings and do all the presentations and stress and worry about whether the deal will go through or not and worry about whether the stock exchange is going to go up or down. He did all the stressing. I just did the driving. But in reality, he did all the work for me because his money is benefiting me today. I married the woman who inherited all of his money. So who are you working for? Who are you working for? Ask yourself the question. Who are you working for? It's a serious question because sometimes you may think, well, I'm working for myself. Are you? The day you die, what are you going to take? What are you going to take? Are you working for yourself? So you're accumulating and your bank balance is increasing. That money is going to go to your inheritors. The hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is very clear in this regard. That when you leave this world, you leave everything behind. What will follow you? Your family will follow you, your friends will follow you, up to the grave. But beyond that, it's only you and your good deeds. It's only you and your good deeds, right? Everything else has to go back. No wife, no matter how much she loves her husband, will say, okay, hubby, darling, I'm going to jump in the grave with you. You know, your son could have been your favorite son, the one you spoiled rotten. No, mommy, I'm going to jump in the grave with you. No ways, no one's going to say that. Your own parents won't jump in the grave with you. You go alone. What will go with you in your grave is your good deeds. And yes, good deeds does not only mean the salah that you performed, or the fast that you kept, or the charity that you gave. Even the money that you earned to offset your expenses, to fulfill your responsibilities as a father, to fulfill your responsibilities as a parent, to fulfill your responsibilities as a child. Financial responsibilities I'm talking about. If your intention was correct, then you have been working for your hereafter. Then whatever you earn in this world and whatever you left behind, it becomes a source of reward for you hereafter. Others will use it how they will use it when you are gone. But in reality, it will be a means of you earning reward in the hereafter. First thing. Second thing, to not neglect what will benefit you when you lie in your grave and what will benefit you in your hereafter to achieve material gain, which will benefit you to a minimal extent and benefit others to a greater extent. So you miss salah because you're so occupied in your shop. And then who's the one who's going to enjoy the fruits of your labor? You'll enjoy it for a while. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? In many ways, it's the irony also. You'll find a man, he'll work, and he'll work, and he'll work. As a result, he compromises his health. He compromises the happiness of his marriage. He doesn't have time to go for holiday. He doesn't have time to worship Allah. Doesn't have time to go to the masjid. Works and works and works. And then he leaves everything behind. Somebody else enjoys it. Now he goes with very little to the after. He goes with very little to the after. So ask yourself the question, who am I working for? What am I working for? What I'm doing, in reality, how much is it going to benefit me? And how much is going to benefit others? Yes, if it benefits others, but it also benefits me, especially in terms of my hereafter, and that is something that I'm comfortable with. Because from an Islamic perspective, if you work hard with the intention of leaving for your children so that they don't need to stretch their hands, understood. But then there isn't an attachment between you and that wealth. There is the attachment between you and Allah. Whatever you are doing it for the pleasure of Allah. I'm working for Allah. That's the answer that we ought to have had. I'm working for Allah. That job is just a means. That business is just a means. That profession is just a means. That initiative or that investment, all of it is just a means. Ultimately, I work for Allah. And if this is working for me, meaning in my balance sheet, in the court of Allah, I'm showing a profit due to my occupation and due to my to how I spend my energies and how I exert myself and how I involve myself in different efforts. If it's reflecting positively in the balance sheets that I have before Allah, then I'm winning. Then no matter what happens, what I win or lose in this world, or how much I leave behind, or whether I get to benefit from what I work for or somebody else gets to benefit from it, in reality, I have won at the end of the day. In reality, I have secured some success. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us that understanding. Coming up first will be our supplication, prayer, dua segment, whatever you want to call it, where we discuss du'as that are taught to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We'll recap on the dua that we discussed last week, and then this week's dua pertains to forgiveness. Then we move on to our hadith segment. We'll talk about, rulership and leadership in Islam. Sometimes when you talk about rulers, there are so many negative connotations these days that people think that, instantly we must distance ourselves from rulers. That is not necessarily the case, and I'll explain that in our hadith discussion. In our Tafseer discussion this evening, inshallah, we'll take a look at Ayatul Kursi, the concluding verses. Now we've been discussing it for a number of months. We'll conclude and we'll wrap up our discussion on Ayatul Kursi. And then last week in the marriage segment, very interesting discussion we had. We spoke about what to do if you think that your husband is likely to become the victim of a shark at the office. And the shark at the office is in reference to another woman. And we spoke last week about how to smartly work your way around that. Today we talk about making demands in times of financial constraints. Yeah, important point. It puts many marriages under strain. Making demands in times of financial constraint. It could be financial constraints in terms of the general financial situation in a country or in the world at the time, or it could be your husband's own individual financial circumstances at that particular time, or the family's financial circumstances at the time. So we will discuss that in our marriage slot, inshallah. Remember, we like to hear from you, our viewers. The email address will appear on the screen from time to time. So too will the Twitter handle and the Facebook details. Whichever mode or whichever platform you prefer, let us know what you think. What are your thoughts? What are your feedback, your contribution, your comments? Inshallah, when we come back from the break, we will commence with our dua segment. Welcome back. We now move on to our dua segment. The dua that we discussed last week was narrated by Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu an, recorded in Tirmidhi. Allahumma zidna wa la tanqusna. That Allah increase for us and do not curtail. Meaning in everything that's good, in everything that's beneficial, grant us more, do not restrict. Wa akrimna wa la tuhinna. Honor us and do not humiliate us. Because honor and humiliation both are in the control of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. No human being can control that. The whole world can try and honor you. If Allah wants to disgrace you, you'll be disgraced. And the whole world can try and disgrace you. If Allah wants to honor you, you'll be honored. وَأَعْطِنَا وَلَا تَحْرِمْنَا. That Allah give us, do not deprive us. Give us of all that which is good, material as well as spiritual. وَآثِرْنَا وَلَا تُؤْثِرْ عَلَيْنَا. And favor us, do not favor others over us. Meaning, do not favor others over us in a way that would be detrimental to us. Otherwise, there are others who will be favored upon us because not everyone will be equal in society and not everyone would be an equal recipient of the favors of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. وَأَرْضِنَا وَارْضَ عَنَّا. And make us be pleased with you, O Allah, and you be pleased with us. And that's the ultimate, isn't it? A person is pleased with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, and Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is pleased with that person. Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya. That's ultimately what we desire, to be pleased with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. With every condition that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala puts us through, with every circumstance that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala puts us in, with the favors that Allah grants us, with that which Allah does not grant us, and more important than that, for Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala to be pleased with us, because that's the ultimate. For a believer, that's the ultimate, that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is pleased with a believer. Now today I want to discuss a dua which is narrated by Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu anhuma. Coincidentally, look at how it's playing out. The dua we discussed this week, narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, Abdullah the son of Umar. The dua we discussed last week was narrated by the father Umar. And the dua that we discussed the week before was also narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. So son, father, son. Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu anhuma mentions, and this narration is in the Mustadrak of Imam Hakim, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught them this dua. Allahumma ghfirli ma qaddamtu wa ma akhartu wa ma asrartu wa ma a'lantu wa ma anta a'lamu bihi minni. Oh Allah, forgive what I did earlier, what I did later, what I did secretly, what I did publicly, and whatever you know more than I. So there's one fundamental request here, but we put it forward in a way that's very encompassing. The fundamental request is that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala should forgive us, and that's how we start the dua. Allahumma ghfirli, that oh Allah forgive me. Ma qaddamtu wa ma akhartu, that which I did earlier and that which I did later, referring to different time periods of our existence. Wa ma asrartu wa ma a'lantu, that which I did in private and that which I did in public, referring to two different spaces in our existence, two different ways. Sometimes you do it secretly, sometimes you do it privately, sometimes you sin in secret, sometimes you sin in the company of others. And then, وَمَا أَنْتَ أَعْلَمُ بِهِ مِنِّي, and forgive all of that which you are more aware of than me. So firstly we're saying, oh Allah, forgive the sins that I committed earlier, then forgive the sins that I committed later, forgive the sins that I committed in secret, then forgive the sins that I committed in public, then forgive all the sins that you are more aware of than me. This last sentence is the most encompassing and embracing, because there are many sins that we are not aware of. We have forgotten. We committed sin, but we forgot. There are many sins that we perpetrated, but we didn't even realize at the time that we were sinning. But all of that is in the knowledge of Allah. Allah doesn't forget. It doesn't slip the mind of Allah. Now a question could come to mind that why don't we just say, oh Allah, forgive me, all of my sins? Why do we go into specifics? All of my sins would have sufficed. ما أخرت وما or rather ما قدمت وما أخرت وما أسررت وما أعلنت وما أنت أعلم به مني. And other du'as would hear ulama make dua, and people make dua. Oh Allah, forgive my past sins, present sins, future sins, major sins, minor sins, those done knowingly, those done unknowingly, those done in secret, and those done in public, and there are different descriptions that are given. Amongst the many answers, the one answer is this, that in this dua of forgiveness, in this request for forgiveness, you are actually acknowledging to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, I have not broken your command in one way. I have broken your command in a plethora of ways. I have broken your commands in a variety of ways. At times it was secretly, at times it was openly, at times it was a major transgression, at times it was a minor transgression, at times it was something that I was aware of, at times it was something that I was not aware of, at times it was something that I did and I was showing off. At times it was something that I did, but at the same time, I was quite embarrassed over the wrong that I was doing. So Allah, I broke your command in a variety of ways, so I'm asking you for forgiveness also in a variety of ways. Allahumma ghfirli ma qaddamtu wa ma akhartu wa ma asrartu wa ma a'lantu wa ma anta a'lamu bihi minni. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen.
وأوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته.
Welcome back. We now move on to our hadith discussion. Last week we discussed two ahadith. The first, a narration of Abu Dawood, narrated by Abu Musa Ash'ari radiyallahu an. He mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, it is part of revering Allah to do the following three things. It is part of showing respect and reverence to Allah to show respect to the following categories of people. Number one, ikrama di shaybatil Muslim, to show reverence to a person who's grey-haired and is a Muslim. And I explained Firstly, he's a Muslim. Secondly, he's elderly, he's grey-haired. And thirdly, he grew old in Islam. That's an honor in itself. So the old people in Islam and old people in general as well, you need to honor them, you need to show them respect. That's part of showing respect to Allah. وَحَامِلِ الْقُرْآنِ غَيْرِ الْغَالِ فِيهِ وَالْجَافِ عَنْ. A person who has memorized the Quran, neither exceeding the proper bounds nor turning away from it. Turning away from it meaning doesn't fulfill the commands of Allah as mentioned in the Quran. And exceeding the bounds meaning in trying to show off in his recitation, for example, he starts to adopt such tunes and he starts to pronounce the words in such a way that actually distort the meaning, and they violate the rules of tajweed, and he's doing all of that just to show off, just because it may sound nice and it may be attractive and it may be captivating to the audience. Then that person obviously is diminishing his eligibility for respect as a hamilul Quran, as a person who has memorized the Quran. And then وَإِكْرَامَ ذِي السُّلْطَانِ الْمُقْسِطِ, and to honor a just ruler. So honoring three people or three types of people is part of honoring Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. A grey-haired Muslim, an elderly Muslim, a hafid of the Quran who abides by the responsibilities that go with being a hafid of the Quran, and a just ruler. And then the second hadith which we discussed last week, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said, Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu anhuma is the narrator, Al-barakatu ma'a akabirikum, that blessings lies with your elders. Blessings are with your elders. And we spoke at great length last week about the balance between the energy of youth and the wisdom and blessings of seniority. And we said both are to blame. It's not only the youngsters who are to blame. Many times we say, these youngsters, they like this and they like that, and dunkel is slim, and those kind of things. But many times it's the elders also who hold on for too long, who continue, trying to keep that iron grip on things, not creating space for others to come through, to follow through, not focusing on succession planning, not developing youngsters, not despite their, despite the overstepping that is as a result of their youthful exuberance. That is what you are expected to do as a senior. Your wisdom and your maturity and your calmness in temperament ought to give you that ability to guide them, even though they are the ones overstepping because of the fire that burns in the belly of a youngster. So both need to adjust their attitude towards the other, because society requires that balance between the young and the old. What does it mean that blessings lie with your elders? It means that because they have been worshipping Allah for a longer duration, therefore they have accumulated and secured greater virtue. So you may be serving the institute now. That person may just be an honorary member, or say he was a founding member. Now we're doing the work. Well, you're doing the work, but he was the one who initiated it. No, founding member. He was the one who laid the foundation. No, he was the one who opened the doors. So all your reward is getting the equivalent. He has greater blessings lying with him. Yes, do what you need to do. Perhaps his ideas are somewhat outdated. Now, I accept that. I'm not saying it's the case all the time, but it happens. Life moves on. Perhaps he doesn't have the energy. Perhaps he falls off to sleep in meetings now. But blessings are still there, Al-barakatu ma'akabirikum. Same thing in the house. The son thinks, it's time for me to take over, man. The old man would sit and but he must sit and make Allah, Allah, no musalla. What he wants to tell me about pack the shelves like this in the shop and, do this and do that. Listen to them. Try and accommodate them. Al-barakatu ma'akabirikum. Blessings lies with your elders. Now, there are two more hadith which I want to discuss this week. The one is narrated by Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu anhuma, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إِنَّ الْعَبْدَ إِذَا نَصَحَ لِسَيِّدِهِ وَأَحْسَنَ عِبَادَةَ اللَّهِ فَلَهُ أَجْرُهُ مَرَّتَيْنِ. This is a narration of Muslim. That when a slave is faithful to his master and he worships Allah well, then he gets a double reward. He is faithful to his master and he worships Allah well, then he gets a double reward. What is the meaning of this hadith? This hadith indicates towards a reality of life. That everybody in life cannot be a chief. You require Indians also. And when we talk about Indians, we're not talking about Indians from a perspective of race. You get a chief and you get an Indian in that context. Everybody cannot be a ruler. Sometimes you have to be led. So you get those who will rule and you get those who will be led. Those who will be ruled over by others. And this hadith is telling us that that does not contradict with the teachings of our deen. That is the system of this world. You are going to be a subordinate to somebody. You are going to be a subject to somebody. It may be a boss in your company. It may be the president of your country. It may be the principal of your school. Whatever the case may be, you are a subordinate to somebody. You are under the authority of somebody. If you fulfill Allah's rights over you and you fulfill that person's rights over you, then you get a double reward. There doesn't have to be a clash. There doesn't have to be a clash. Yes, if that ruler expects you to disobey Allah, then obviously you don't obey that person. You only obey that person because Allah wants you to obey that person. And Allah wants you to obey that person because there has to be system in this world. And there has to be balance. And there has to be stability. And if everyone wants to be a chief and nobody wants to be an Indian, there'll be no balance. And there'll be no stability. So leaders are not necessarily bad. And you know, this message or this notion that society has sometimes, that leaders are there so that they can be rebelled against, it's wrong. It's wrong. If they're doing wrong, yes, then you stand up. And you know, in different circumstances, different actions and different responses will be justified and will be understood. But as a general principle, when you have somebody that rules over you, whether it be as the rule of the country or as the rule of an institute or as the rule of a school or as the ruler of the business, then you must accept that person's authority. And within the parameters of the Sharia, fulfill that person's rights. Then by fulfilling that person's rights and by fulfilling the rights of Allah, which are independent. That person's rights are also part of the rights of Allah because those rights have been given to him by Allah. But then the direct rights of Allah, like your salah and your fasting, etc., you get double reward. You get reward for doing that and you get reward for doing this. And these teachings of Islam create that balance in society. And then there's another hadith wherein it is mentioned, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is the narrator. It's in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had said, من أكرم سلطان الله تبارك وتعالى في الدنيا أكرمه الله يوم القيامة ومن أهان سلطان الله عز وجل في الدنيا أهانه الله يوم القيامة. That he who honors a king that has been appointed by Allah in this world, Allah will honor him on the day of Qiyamah. And if you go and dishonor a king who has been appointed by Allah in this world, Allah will dishonor you on the day of Qiyamah. So, the point I've been making here is that rulers are not necessarily bad. Maybe in today's time and age, because there are so many rulers that are corrupt, or there are so many rulers who are only focused on enriching themselves, that there's this negative connotation. And leadership in many ways have become stigmatized. That if a person reaches the position of being a leader, then it means that he's in some way or the other compromised. But that's not the default position. That's not how it was always, and that's not how it should be. There are many good rulers, and when there are good rulers, you should not unnecessarily interfere. You should not go and try and disgrace them and dishonor them, because you are then interfering with that stability, and you are interfering with that equilibrium that is required in society. You are unnecessarily stirring the pot, stirring trouble, causing and causing fitna. So if you honor a person who's a just ruler, who's a good ruler, and you contribute towards that stability, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will honor you on the day of Qiyamah. But if you disrupt the stability of a just ruler by trying to dishonor him for whatever reasons you may have, then Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, as a punishment, will dishonor you on the day of Qiyamah. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the understanding. Welcome back. We now move on to our Tafseer segment. And last week we discussed a sentence from Ayatul Kursi, which relates to the throne, to the Kursi of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And that's where the verse gets the name from. وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says His throne includes and encompasses the heavens and the earth. And we discussed that the throne of Allah is greater than the heavens and the earth, the seven heavens and the earth rolled out. And then we discussed that there are two words that are used in the Quran. One is Kursi and the other one is Arsh. Some commentators have translated both to mean the throne of Allah, and others have translated Kursi in a literal sense as chair and Arsh as the throne of Allah. And Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma is amongst those, and he says the Kursi is greater than the heavens and the earth rolled out. How much greater? Like a small ring thrown in the vast desert. That ring lying in the vast desert is small in comparison to the entire desert. The entire earth and heavens rolled out is small in comparison to the Kursi. And the Kursi is small, like a ring in the desert in comparison to the Arsh. We said we mustn't think of Arsh and Kursi like a chair and throne in this world, and how a human would relate to a chair or a throne. No, because there's nothing that can be similar to Allah, and Allah cannot be compared to anything. The Quran mentions the throne of Allah, so we believe that Allah has a throne, but the nature of the throne is appropriate to the grandeur and to the greatness and to the exclusivity that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala enjoys, and the uniqueness that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala enjoys. And now we discuss the next sentence where Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, وَلَا يَؤُودُهُ حِفْظُهُمَا, and He never tires to preserve them. Meaning, none of the creation of Allah are excluded from His protection, irrespective of their location. Man, on the other hand, is incapable of even looking after a single soul. You can't look after your own soul, let alone somebody else's soul, let alone the entire creation. Allah can look after His Arsh, He can look after His Kursi, He can look after the angels, He can look after the jinn, He can look after men, He can look after animals, He can look after mammals, He can look after fish, He can look after insects. Allah looks after planets, Allah looks after galaxies, Allah looks after the universe. After Allah looks and sustains and nourishes and cherishes and maintains everything. That's why the verse concludes by saying, وَهُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمُ. Allah is the high, the tremendous. Allah is the high, the tremendous. In this verse, Ayatul Kursi, many attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala have been mentioned. For example, Allah is self-subsisting. Allah is the maintainer of others. Allah is free of all defects. Allah shares no grounds of similarity with any other being. Allah creates everything. Allah creates everything which is original and duplicate. Allah is most powerful to address matters. Allah knows every apparent and hidden phenomenon. Nothing can overwhelm Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Allah is free of anything not befitting His position. These are some of the attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala which have been made mention of in Ayatul Kursi. Now, as we wrap up our discussion on Ayatul Kursi, I think it's only appropriate that we recap some of the benefits of Ayatul Kursi, some of the virtues of Ayatul Kursi. There are many virtues mentioned with regards to Ayatul Kursi. There's a narration of Ali radiallahu an that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had said, that person who recites Ayatul Kursi after every salah, only death is a barrier between him and Jannah. Meaning reciting Ayatul Kursi after every salah will secure you entry into Jannah. It's only that you have to go now into the vehicle of death, and death transports you towards Jannah. And a person who recites Ayatul Kursi at night before retiring for bed, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will protect that person, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will protect that person's neighbors as well. So we obviously we're worried about crime, and we're worried about the difficulties that result from the crime situation in our country. Recite Ayatul Kursi at night. Take your protective measures. Nobody says no. Your alarm system and your burglar bars and street security and panic button and whatever it may be. But recite Ayatul Kursi. It's the greatest protection. In another hadith, it is mentioned if Ayatul Kursi was recited, if a person recites Ayatul Kursi upon retiring to bed, Allah appoints a guardian angel over him until the time of dawn, until the time of Fajr. No devil can approach him. And if you recite Ayatul Kursi with the first few verses of Surah Hamim, the first Surah Hamim, Hamim Tanzilul Kitabi min Allahil Azizil Alim, Ghafiri Dhambi, wa Qabilit Tawbi, Shadidil Iqabi Dit Tawli, La ilaha illahu, ilayhil masir. Until the word masir. If you recite it in the morning, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grants you safety in the evening. And if you recite it in the evening, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grants you safety until the morning. So these are some of the many virtues of Ayatul Kursi. We went through a brief explanation in the Tafseer. Otherwise, there's a lot more that we can discuss. But just to give you an idea of what wealth of meaning there is in the Quran Kareem. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the understanding. We now move on to the final segment for this evening's program, and that is where we discuss the marital tip for the evening. Now, last week we had a very interesting discussion. We said, how do you react if you feel your husband is likely to succumb to temptation from a woman in the workplace? We discussed some of the reactions that you can have that would exacerbate the situation rather than improve the situation. We said you can throw a tantrum, you can phone that woman and swear her to hell and back. And if she's really interested in your husband, then she'll say, okay, game on. You can make your husband feel, besieged, checking his cell phone all the time and checking up on him like Tracker or Netstar without the subscription. Or you can be smart about it. How about your husband getting a beautiful bouquet of flowers as a surprise gift at work? It sends a loud message to all the ladies there that this is a man whose wife is very focused on him. How about sending him to work with a smile and receiving him with a smile? If you see his eyes wandering in the shopping mall, rather than giving him a varama clap in front of everyone, or rather than sulking, or rather than coming home and fighting with him, that, yeah, you're looking at all other women, and what kind of a Muslim are you? And that beard of yours is fake, and you go and perform salah, and you give a lot of charity, but you can't even control your gaze. Understand that, okay, what he's doing is wrong, but he's human. Maybe surprise him when he comes home. Then there'll be less for him for his eyes to stray. And these things are mentioned in the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Be sober about it. Be mature about it. Be smart about how you approach these things. Now, what I want to discuss for this week is about making unrealistic demands at times when economic difficulties are prevalent. It may be, like we're going through in the country at the moment. Economically, all analysts are saying it's not the best of times. The economy is not very good. Things are going up. Electricity, petrol, the rand is weakening. They're saying consumers are finding it tough. This is not the time to be, demanding a Gucci handbag or a Prada shoe or a particular type of watch. And we also need to do some soul searching. That how is it that we allow ourselves to be defined by these commodities? Does a particular type of handbag define who you are? Have we become so cheap? How about, telling your husband, for example, and saying, you know what, I understand things are tough. I understand that you're struggling to make ends meet. No, you don't, even if he's offering to buy, you decline and you say, you know what, we'll make do what we have. There's this function coming up. I'll wear a dress that I wore to another function. I don't think that many people were there in that previous function will be at this function. I'm fine. I don't need a new dress. Every year you take us for holiday. This year, I think it's not the end of the world if we don't go for holiday. We'll be at home. We'll relax with the children. We'll connect with the children. It's fine. You need to also understand that, there are different moments in life. And this is a very key point, because what happens is when you make demands, you put strain. You come across as being very ungrateful, unsympathetic. You come across as being a person who's not willing to understand. Then at times it may not be general economic difficulty. It may be economic difficulty specific to your husband or specific to the family. Maybe the business is just not doing well. Or maybe the boss is retrenching and now the husband is worried. And maybe he had to take a bit of a pay cut. Maybe there wasn't a bonus that year. Maybe there was an unexpected expense. These are the times where you need to show your true love. That, you know what, I'm not only here because you can buy me this particular handbag or buy me a particular outfit. Don't make your husband feel inadequate. Don't make him feel inadequate because he cannot provide. Things are tough out there. There are people that, put so much of pressure that the man will get involved in riba. He'll go and buy. Daughters who put so much pressure on their fathers. I want a particular type of wedding. It has to be like this. And so many people have to be invited. And then what happens? The man goes and breaks the bank. He goes and takes a loan. He puts his house at risk just so that he can throw that lavish function and bring a smile to his daughter's face and keep his wife from reminding him how inadequate he is. This obviously is something that is highly problematic. We have to answer to Allah wa ta'ala, and we bring great difficulty upon ourselves, and we bring great difficulty upon our husbands, and we bring great difficulty and tension into our marriage and into our homes. Remember, these material things don't define you. Ultimately, these material things are not the things and the factors that lead to happiness. Happiness is about something far greater and far more significant and far more, wholesome. In the end of the day, these are just the glitter of this dunya. Have the gold. What about that woman who's got millions in the bank account, but her husband has passed away? You'd rather say, you know what, I don't have it and I might not have it, but my husband is still alive. What about those who have billions, but they're cheating on each other and there's no happiness in the marriage and the home is dysfunctional and the children are delinquents and it's like Jahannam on earth in that particular home, even though it may be a palace. Then you sit back and you say, let me appreciate what I have. Let me appreciate what my Allah has given me. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of the Sulaimaan Ravat Show. We make dua to Allah wa ta'ala that He accepts our humble efforts and that He takes the message of His Quran and the message of His Nabi via this particular voice and via this medium throughout the globe. And may Allah wa ta'ala make it a means of hidayat and guidance for the speaker as well as the viewers. Remember, you can interact with us via email, via Twitter, via Facebook. And until we meet again, في أمان الله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
فالمسجد الأقصى ما زال يدعونا ندي على الفتية الأحرار في زمن أضحى به الحق بالغ